Women's Community Shelters is an organisation that assists in establishing and running crisis accommodation centres for women and children here in New South Wales. The shelters provide short-term accommodation and support services to those in need, often as the result of domestic violence. More than 50,000 women are homeless every night in Australia, and shelters are full to bursting. Every second woman who approaches a shelter has to be turned away for lack of resources. WCS aims to address that need. Walk the Talk is a new program by Women's Community Shelters that aims to involve high schools in supporting their local shelter. Dannielle Miller, Education Officer at WCS, developed the program after joining the board of the Castle Hill Shelter in 2015.
And one of the first things I did as a board member was decide that I wanted to ensure that eventually we could close our doors and that domestic violence wouldn't be such an issue in our local area. So I approached the local boys' school, Oak Hill College, and encouraged those boys to adopt the refuge and to work to support our endeavours. So they did things like volunteer at our events, make welcome packs for the women, and do community awareness for us.
The initiative was such a success, Dannielle was tasked with rolling the program out statewide. This year, the program begins in earnest. Walk the Talk is running in 12 schools this term, with more to begin next term. Dannielle says the young students bring a fresh perspective to helping women in need.
Teenagers are really creative, much more so than we often are. And so one of the first things we do when we go in is ask them to get into little circles and to brainstorm what sort of things would you like to do to support your local refuge. And they've come up with some incredible ideas. I know the young girls at Stella Maris College in Manly decided that the refuge's curtains and cushions in some of the photos they saw looked a little threadbare. So they've been deciding to make and design and create new curtains and cushions for them. I know some of the students at Rouse Hill High School decided that they wanted to create a vegetable patch at their school and sell some of that produce in order to raise money. So, creative, interesting ideas, student-led, and that's the key.
At the end of Term 4, the Walk the Talk Awards recognise the work of the students. Those who have been particularly active or innovative in their approach to supporting the shelters are rewarded. But the Walk the Talk program goes beyond financial and material support for women's shelters. It aims to tackle the root causes of women's homelessness. One of the biggest issues is domestic violence, and the program educates young students about healthy relationships. Yesterday, Dannielle presented the introductory class to Pittwater House Girls College.
The CEO of Women's Community Shelters, Annabelle Daniel, happened to watch me present yesterday. And one of the things she said is it was like I was sort of vaccinating them to help prevent domestic violence in their futures. And one of the ways you do that is by encouraging girls to really deconstruct relationships.
Lorna Prost is the head of the Girls College at Pittwater House and attended yesterday's introductory course. She said the students were inspired.
It was outstanding. The feedback from the students was that they gained so much. They gained so many skills and strategies. They were able to talk about their feelings, positive relationships, friendships, how do friendships sort of stay, the effect and the role of friendship, the importance of friendship.
This focus on friendships is an important one. Isolation is a common tool of abusers. Dannielle again.
So one of the things the research shows us about domestic violence is that often perpetrators of violence do target women who they perhaps see as a little more vulnerable or a little more isolated, or indeed go about trying to isolate them. So it is really important that we encourage young people, girls and boys, because boys had that very same conversation and experience, to recognise healthy relationships, to know how to nurture those, and to know who to go to when perhaps things don't feel so right and they're not feeling so comfortable and understood and respected.
Domestic violence is overwhelmingly perpetrated by men. Dannielle presented yesterday to the Girls' College, while a male colleague presented to the boys. The boys necessarily receive a different lesson.
He talks to the boys about some of the myths around masculinity that aren't very helpful. So things like the idea that real men can't cry. I cried yesterday speaking to a young boy, and I'll share this experience with you. This just goes to show what some young men are dealing with in terms of feeling that their emotional needs get shut down. So we spoke to a teenage boy yesterday who said that he had felt such shame and humiliation because he's been crying a lot in his bedroom because his dog died recently and he really loved his dog. And he said that he felt not only a great sense of loss for his pet, but a great sense of humiliation that he was crying about that. And after hearing Jack and seeing that his peers agree that crying is a really healthy and normal thing for guys to do, he actually felt that he could probably go home and have a good ball and not feel any of that guilt and shame and release some of that emotion. So they really respond to these open, honest, funny, positive conversations.
The boys' lessons have to approach the complex reality of men's violence towards women without making them feel culpable themselves.
That has to be handled incredibly sensitively. You don't want to be going in and saying, you guys are all future perpetrators. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And the reality is that the vast majority of men, young men and older men, agree that domestic violence is really abhorrent. The truth of it is, too, that we know statistically when we do talk to groups of teenagers, there will be some boys in that space who are in homes where there's domestic violence and who do feel a little scared of dad, and often may feel some guilt and some shame about that and feel pressured that they're supposed to step up and do something about that, when of course they just don't have the capacity to do so. So it has to be handled really sensitively and really positively.
Pitt Waterhouse have reacted with huge positivity towards the program. Head of College Lorna Prost has asked Dannielle to expand the program in their school.
We did email Danny a very extensive breakdown about how much we appreciated it. We also did ask Danny if after this workshop, because we saw it not just on paper but firsthand, but we've actually asked her to come back and do a session similar for our Year 7s and 8s.
Dannielle herself has huge aspirations for the program.
This is going to be the game changer, and I'll tell you why I think that. Education is one thing, and I really do believe that when we go in, and as the school's told you, and we talk to young people, they respond, heart and soul. They're really with us in that moment. But what I think makes this so special is that is then followed up and they get to walk that talk. We say, if you say you care, you say this matters to you, show us. What are you going to do about it? Generational change and grassroots, hands-on, heart, endeavours, it's got to work.